Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and Ranking Member, and I truly appreciate your courtesy in allowing me to rejoin the Natural Resources Committee for this critical hearing. And it should come as no surprise that my concern is for our marine environment. I have introduced two pieces of legislation that would affirmatively place a moratorium on any domestic or international deep sea mining until we know exactly what's going on in our ocean. So no surprises where I'm coming from on this. Mr. Barron, back a couple of years ago when you were questioned about concerns with environmental impacts of deep sea mining, you stated in the press that where you wanted to mine is a quote unquote marine desert. If you measure the amount of life there, it is measured in grams per square meter. There are no trees, no plants at all. You also said that your mechanism for deep sea mining is blasting a jet of water to the nodule to lift it up. In this part of the ocean floor, there isn't much to impact to begin with. You stand by those statements?
Thank you for the question. Yes, I do.
Okay, and what is the basis, the scientific environmental basis for your statements that basically there won't be any particular impacts from? Can you point to a specific study? Like you held up a bunch of paper there. Is that from the original act back in 1980, or is that more recent, or what's the basis for that statement?
Well, I think it begins with the fact that if we think about all of the landscapes on our planet, and if we were to draw a bar chart, and on the right-hand side, you'd have an environment that has the most life that could be impacted, and that would be called our tropical forests.
Yeah, what I'm asking for is, do you cite a specific scientific study?
Yes.
And where is that study for the basis for your statement? That's what I'm getting at.
Yes, and I'll get to that in a moment.
But I have a limited amount of time, so what I'm doing is I'm asking a very specific question. What is the scientific basis for your statement?
Well, I'll draw you to my testimonial, where we cite all of, or many of the studies that have been carried out. And in fact, just recently, of course, I heard people refer to the DOMES study that was carried out back from the trials that were done in the 1970s.
Okay.
Our own studies, we revisited the area where we had collected nodules from in 2022. And when we went back a year later, we found that Foraminifera in the tracks had recovered 30% to pre-disturbance levels.
Okay, so are those your studies, Mr. Barron?
Well, they're studies we fund.
Your company's studies?
They're studies we fund.
Okay, yeah, they're studies you fund. And as far as the underlying environmental impact statement that you referenced, that was back to the 70s, which was related to the passage of the law in 1980 that we are relying upon today for our environmental protections. Is that correct, under the executive order?
The trials were done in 1979, and of course, the study that went back last year was a broad range of funders, all independent, who went back on a study that was published only 2 weeks ago, I believe.
Okay, all right. So I've read that executive order, and first of all, I see absolutely no reference to environmental protection whatsoever in the president's executive order. The word environment is mentioned once, and it's kind of a throwaway. It's a reference to a 1980 law, which we propose to proceed under. Obviously, a lot has changed, I believe, since 1980. So, Mr. Curry, let me just focus a couple of questions on you, because fundamentally, I don't think that we have those studies in hand right now. First of all, it strikes me that we are only studying one kind of extraction. So, for example, plucking a nodule off of the sea floor. The videos I've seen show a big old clam shell dredge coming down, impacting, going down deeper than 2 inches, by the way, and sucking up a bunch of the ocean floor. We also have the technique which is fundamentally strip mining the ocean floor and dragging stuff across it. Is there any limitation on what kind of mining we would be able to do under this executive order that you know of, or are we just focusing our studies only on one particular type of least intrusive impact?
Yes, I would not call it least intrusive impact. I think the kind of damage that you talk about is clear. in my opening remarks, I talked about the damage to the nodules. We know the nodules themselves have life on them. We know between 50 and 70% of deep sea life are dependent on the nodules. We know that the deep sea plume will smother the life that is down there. And it really is very deeply concerning to hear Mr. Barron make such clearly scientifically incorrect statements when this is the company that proposes to do the seabed mining in the deep sea 5,000 metres deep, far away from any regulatory authorities, far away from any controls.
I'm not going to overstep my welcome in this committee, and my time is up.
We'll do
Chair.
a second round if you'd like to stay around.
Thank you so much, and I would ask for a consent to be able to submit written records. Written questions for this.
Recognize the gentleman from Hawaii, Mr. Case. The floor is yours for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Madam Secretary, I appreciate your rosy report on the Department of Homeland Security. I have a different view on where the department is today and where you, and by you I'm going to refer to the President, the administration, and you as Secretary, are taking it as reflected into your actions and budgets, not just in your words. But I think it's important that we start by some points of agreement. First of all, I think you would agree, I hope you would agree, that the 270 or so thousand members of the DHS workforce, if that's what the figure is now, and we would like to find out what the figure is at some point, spread across your 22 departments, all deserve our praise for their dedication, for serving our country every day, and they also deserve our professional respect. I think we would also agree that the efforts to legally reduce illegal immigration and illegal drugs of the past couple of years across our borders are paying off and should be continued. So I agree with you on those things. Overall, however, and focusing on the budget, because this is the Appropriations Committee, what little you have shown us thus far of your FY 2026 budget, it looks like you are definitely overfunding some efforts, mainly for messaging purposes, at the expense of some other efforts that are really critical, such as cybersecurity, disaster prevention and mitigation, transportation security. And you're using budget gimmicks to misdirect and conceal your intent. On your budget gimmicks, you claim a 65% increase in DHS's overall budget, targeted at the border, drugs, and the Coast Guard. But all of that increase or more is loaded into your separate reconciliation bill. You have essentially, for this purposes of this committee, level funded DHS and loaded all of the extra money into reconciliation. First of all, aside from completely sidetracking this particular committee, which is supposed to be doing that funding, you should know, if you don't already, that this is not an appropriate use of reconciliation. It's intended to maintain the illusion of responsible budgeting. It certainly is holding needed DHS increases, which many of us would support in other situations, hostage to your overall reconciliation plan of continuing tax cuts for billionaires and slashes in critical programs like Medicaid. So the question I have, and it's a rhetorical question since I'm making a statement here, is why don't you just come into this committee and say it straight? We need a 65% or more increase in DHS to actually protect our national security. Your increase is also heavily skewed to the border generally and CPB specifically, some $20 billion, all of it in reconciliation. And nobody disputes that CPB needs help. I've been to the border 3 times myself. I've spent time with the agents, and certainly personnel and equipment costs are necessary. But a question that I have from an oversight perspective is, if you are claiming such success at the border, which without spending all of this extra money, which you're now asking for, do we need to do that at the expense of other programs? And I mean the non-personnel stuff. You're also loading half of your reconciliation increase into the U.S. Coast Guard, $21 billion. And everybody agrees that the Coast Guard needs help. It's critical in the Indo-Pacific, where you have actually withdrawn from the Indo-Pacific, which I think was a tremendous mistake. Why don't you just ask for that in your base budget rather than trying to hide and extort it in reconciliation? Your budget also ignores and even attacks other critical functions of DHS, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, or CISA, which I think we would all agree is critical to direct national defense, but also civilian infrastructure, which is the most exposed right now, and the reliance of foreign countries on our expertise to help them with their cybersecurity, and yet you propose to to reduce CISA by 20% in your base budget. And I don't think that you can claim that that's all somehow Biden misdirection. FEMA, another example of misbudgeting in my view. You, first of all, collectively have directed very incorrect and outright mean criticism at FEMA, which is just undeserved by FEMA. And it's time to put the political campaign behind us and acknowledge that FEMA is doing a good job. They did an outstanding job on Maui, and I sat with them on Maui when they were trying their very best and did their very best while their president was criticizing their work. We don't need this, and further, we certainly need to fund them adequately. Transportation Security Administration, same basic observation, a critical agency which you have not adequately funded. So fundamentally, my time is running short. Obviously, this is a critical agency. It deserves to be led responsibly and transparently. It deserves to be budgeted for transparently and responsibly. And until we get there, I do not feel safer under your leadership at DHS. Secretary Ashworth, when we passed the FY 2025 continuing resolution for the rest of this year, Congress also provided funding tables to the Department of Defense. I'm sorry.
Ed, is your mic
Yeah.
on?
Congress also provided funding tables to the Department of Defense, setting forth our expectations and instructions on how to spend that money. Are you following those funding tables? Is there any exception to your following the funding tables?
I am aware that we provided the spend plans as requested and tried to make the best adjustments we could to make up for the difference between what we were expecting in a budget and a full appropriations compared to what we got through a full year for a full year continuing resolution, which was about $4.6 billion less. And so those are the issues that as we were moving through this process. By the way, we appreciate the additional flexibility that this committee and Congress put into that continuing resolution that made it a little bit more flexible than a regular continuing resolution, but we still had significant issues on trying to reconcile that $4.6 billion. And so when we provided our spend plan, we tried to make the adjustments within appropriation that we could to try to get after those issues.
Okay, I think I'm going to take that as a good faith effort to follow the funding tables. I just wanted to know of any unknown, undisclosed deviations from the funding tables. None of those.
Not to my knowledge.
Okay, cool. I just wanted to follow up on Ms. McCollum's questions because I'm also trying to make some sense in anticipation of actually making decisions on this budget for FY 2026 of a lot of different things that are going on. So the first one is we started at the beginning of this year with the instruction to all the services to at least come up with a scenario to reduce by 8%. Okay, and presumably all the services went through that scenario. Then what happened next is that you came out with a skinny budget which was level funded, which would imply that nobody went through an 8% reduction, maybe internally. If I'm not mistaken, there's been no allocation of the skinny budget to any of the services. So presumably the decision as to actually where you are going to allocate that skinny budget is still outstanding, and that probably plays back into your evaluation of the 8%, I would assume. But you also have a reconciliation package, which significantly increases the budget over and above the regular appropriations process, and I'm not aware of that actually being broken out into services. I see that some of the services, for example, the Army, who's going to be here tomorrow, are acting on the assumption that they do not have an increase in that budget, and are actually issuing orders right now to the force to change various approaches to comply with that budget assumption. So I guess the question really is, in all of that fluidity, what's actually happening with your department, with the Space Force and the Air Force? Are you still very fluid as to what your final numbers are in FY 2026? Or have you narrowed it down? Are you starting to focus in on 8% savings possibilities, or is it going to be an up or what? Can you just get into a little bit more where you are right now?
So at this point in time, we've been continuing to work internal to the building on deliberations on exactly what you've been talking about. What is going to go into the final budget, and the budget, as I understand, is going to be two parts in our request. It's going to be a mandatory spending and discretionary spending. And so there will be an appropriations piece and a reconciliation piece as part of the request that we're making. And so we're going
Is there
through.
an allocation of the reconciliation as between the services?
I have not seen an allocation to us, but there is absolutely work going on within the building to allocate resources against one or the other as we move through this.
Okay, so if the reconciliation bill came before Congress tomorrow and had, had a request for that, 100 and some odd billion of extra money on the mandatory side through reconciliation, we would have trouble actually splitting that up right now. I mean, that's what I'm interpreting you saying. We don't
My
really-
understanding when you receive the budget from OMB and it comes through the department is that it will be broken out for you as to what is in the appropriation and what is in the reconciliation part of those bills.
Okay, and can you say right now, and if you can't, that's fine, can you say what the net effect is for the Air Force? What kind of shooting target should be we anticipating here?
I cannot say right now before the budget is released.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Hamilton, aloha. In September 24, then candidate Trump, on a visit to Asheville, North Carolina, in the wake of Hurricane Helene, stated, quote, "I think, frankly, FEMA's not good. FEMA has turned out to be a disaster. I think we're going to recommend that FEMA go away," unquote. On January 22nd, President Trump stated, quote, "All FEMA does is complicate everything. FEMA has not done its job for the last 4 years." In August of 2023, a once-and-forever wildfire ripped through Maui, in particular Lahaina. The town of Lahaina was destroyed. 102 people died. There were roughly 2,200 structures destroyed, 12,000 people displaced, 7,000 people directly benefiting from FEMA on the ground. FEMA's expenditures to date have been north of $700 million direct, and other federal agencies north of $1 billion in response. Economic damage was in the range of $4 to $6 billion, as high as $10 billion plus. We do not, on Maui, based on our own experience, believe that FEMA should go away. We do not believe that it complicates everything. We do not believe that it didn't do its job. In fact, FEMA helped us to save the day after a devastating disaster. FEMA has done an excellent job on Maui. And the people in FEMA who did that job for us do not deserve this rhetoric. Do not deserve that rhetoric. And as I said to the Secretary yesterday, the campaign is over. And it's time for us to put this stuff away so that we can have a productive discussion about what federalism means in emergency management. I'm all in on that discussion, but this is not the way to do that. Now, in the subject of trying to understand what your budget means for the Appropriations Committee here, if I understand correctly, what your skinny budget indicates is that you are intending to fundamentally continue, if not increase, direct FEMA disaster relief, so direct relief, in other words, to a disaster. I'm breaking this down into really prevention mitigation, which is pre-disaster, at least in my mind, and then emergency response and recovery on the back end. My understanding is you're not particularly going after the back end, but you're going after the front end for sure. And I believe that I understand that somewhere around $3 billion in the FEMA non-disaster category, you're proposing to reduce that FEMA non-disaster category by $646 million, which is 20% of that slice. You have directly called out the Violence and Terrorism Prevention Grant of $18 million. You have also directly called out the National Domestic Preparedness Consortium of $91 million. That leaves me with a math missing in the non-disaster of $537 million. Is your view then that that $537 million is subject to a federalism debate and that state and county governments or somebody else should take that over? Primarily, I think, in the prevention and mitigation side of this. So trying to keep disasters from occurring to start with. And consider that if we had prevented Maui from occurring to start with, or anybody else, whether it be Hurricane Helene or California or Florida or Louisiana, we may not have had a multi-billion-dollar federal obligation on the back end. So what's going on with your proposed cuts on the non-disaster side? What else are you proposing to cut?
Yes, sir, that's a great question. I will tell you that we stand, again, consistent with the President's agenda on his recommendations for our budget. And there are some, we're looking to overhaul the grant process entirely. Again, as I mentioned earlier, preparedness versus risk reduction. And so there's several different grants that you'll likely see in the future of proposed where they're sort of consolidated, made simpler, less grant programs, greater options and availability. There's discussions ongoing about what block grants would look like, how they're executed, giving sub-programs for them on the preparedness side. And so we're unpacking each of that as it currently sits. On each of these sub-grant discussions on what makes up that total number, I'd be happy to follow up with you on more specifics and show you specifically where we're looking at additional cuts so that we can.
Okay, well, we can do that in the remainder of the process. I'm just interested in what you're trying to cut other than the things that you've called out, because it's a pretty big cut in that category, 20%. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Lyons, I'm trying to just understand the FY 2026 budget and how it's coming out, especially as it affects ICE. So as I understand it, the skinny budget that came out for the overall Department of Homeland Security proposed a substantial increase of about $43 billion, which was about 65%. But all of that is in reconciliation, and I completely endorse the ranking member's comments on the complete inappropriateness of the use of reconciliation for base budget decisions. You also apparently are proposing in that skinny budget substantial reductions in the base budget for key federal agencies such as FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, or CISA, Transportation Security Administration, key for air travel. So these are all key agencies, and we obviously disagree with the proposed reductions in those key agencies. However, if you add that all up, it seems to me that if you're reducing your base budget by $2 billion, then it's going to be increased somewhere else if your net is zero, which I think you've said. Are you anticipating that there will in fact be an increase in the president's budget in ICE, and where would that increase come from?
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. Appreciate the question. I'll actually have to refer to Secretary Noem and her testimony and the Department of Homeland Security, sir, as ICE doesn't have any input on CISA, FEMA, or TSA's budget. What I would say is that I said to the ranking member is it's fiscally irresponsible for us to rely on reconciliation. My goal is to work with this committee, work with members of Congress to ensure that we are financially responsible and that we work within our means and what the committees legally and through the budget have set for us, and we ensure that we spend the American taxpayers wisely.
Let me ask you in a different way then.
Yes, sir.
Maybe you can answer this question. Where do you think the greatest financial stresses are in ICE, where you would, in an analysis of ICE, want to increase your base budget?
Yes, sir. Obviously, the one big key piece of the ICE budget is detention space, sir. Detention space and our removal contracts. That is one of the key parts to our budget right now. That is a large piece. But also, sir, we are focusing on ensuring that the other programs, much to the one that the ranking member brought up, Homeland Security Investigations, our Office of Principal Legal Advisors, that we make sure they have the right tools and resources to focus on the public safety threats and the national security mission.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Focusing within ICE on Homeland Security Investigations, HSI, I appreciate my colleague from Iowa's comments, very much a support of HSI, both domestically and from the foreign policy perspective, because as you pointed out in your testimony, crime doesn't stop at our borders, and neither do we. And so you have, as part of your HSI team, a very extensive team around the world, including, I think it was 90 offices in 50 countries, as I recall.
Are you intending to preserve those offices? Obviously a rhetorical question, because I do believe that those offices are key to our foreign policy, especially as we're withdrawing in other aspects of our foreign policy. These are key not just for law enforcement, for networking and partnership with our partner and ally countries around the world. Is there any threat to those offices?
No, sir, it's not. And I can guarantee you here today that, especially in your region, Indo-Pacific region, that's a key national security element to the safety and security of the United States. HSI is a key component to that. We're dedicated, our resources out there. Like I said, in maritime operations, illicit drugs, human trafficking. And not only that, sir, but we're dedicated to the cyber intelligence and the counterintelligence of that region. When I first became the acting director of ICE, one of my first meetings was with the DOD, Criminal Investigative Services. I met with NCIS, CID, and specifically we focused on the Indo-Pacific region in regards to our military bases, to work jointly to ensure that we had no incursion to those bases, and to ensure that HSI is a key part of that counterintelligence piece in that region.
Okay, and I would commend to you your Pacific Islands Liaison Initiative, which President Trump actually started in the first part of his administration. That's a key ingredient to be preserved in that context. I yield the balance of my time to the ranking member. Mr. Flores, first of all, thanks for your service. I think I counted 37 years or so. So you've been on the front line for a long time. Appreciate your stepping into this role. What I want to do is follow up on a line of questioning that I had with the Secretary when she testified about the cost benefit of a border wall. And let me give you some context. First of all, I've been to the border 3 times myself. I've talked with many of your officers on the ground. I believe, and I believe it may be the consensus of some of the officers on the ground, that we definitely need to rehabilitate, expand, and extend the border wall in some parts, but not all 1,954 miles. I'm not going to speak for them, but that's my conclusion. So what I'm interested in is understanding the administration's, where the administration is trying to go and what are the consequences of doing that. So my understanding is that in FY 2024, continued to 2025, Customs and Border Protection was funded at about $19.6 billion. The skinny budget doesn't specifically call out CBP, but it's a level funded budget, and I don't think that there is an assumption of an increase for CBP in the skinny budget. But reconciliation clearly front loads CBP to the tune of about $64.9 billion, which is 3 times more than the annual funding, of which $46.5 billion is to build the border wall. So that means that of the entire reconciliation budget, 71.6% is allocated to a border wall in the CBP, which is twice the annual budget of all of CBP, as contrasted with $2.8 billion to border surveillance, which I think we would all agree is also an important part of actually securing our border. My question to Secretary Noem was this. That's a heck of a lot of money to put into a border wall. And if we've seen such a drastic decrease in entries into this country, which is good news, by the way, congratulations to everybody that pulled that off. But if we've got this under control from a non-1954 mile border wall, then why are we investing that much in a border wall? And so the subsidiary part of the question is, does that $46.5 billion assume, what's the assumption under that? How much wall does that buy, $46.5 billion?
So Congressman, thank you for the question. So within CBP, in our evaluation, we've recognized needs in regards to expanding border walls, not just the border wall system. So infrastructure is one thing. When you talk about infrastructure, an actual physical infrastructure, a wall, and you can talk about border roads and access roads, which become equally as important. But the border wall system also includes technology. So that means we're talking about fiber optic cable, we're talking about sensors, we're talking about cameras, autonomous cameras, and that all combining together and to systemize just a border wall system in what we're doing. So what we have planned for in regards to needs that we have, So based on support from the committee, operationalizing what some of those needs are in regards to border wall, border barrier, both the primary wall and secondary wall,
Okay.
but it includes the technology as well.
All right, cool. And I'm fine with all of your technology, and I'm fine with all of that, border roads, and I'm fine with everything else in terms of, taking care of our agents. But I guess my specific question is, what's the assumption as to a physical barrier, an extension of that barrier? Because $46.5 billion is a lot of money to spend when, the administration says that it has solved the problem already. So my question is, from a cost-benefit perspective, what assumption are we making with the border wall in that 46.5? The wall itself.
So the wall itself, we recognize the operational need and the funding in order to build, and we don't have the funding for that. We've used our current funding in order to build the current wall that we have either in some type of planning or construction phases.
I don't mean to, I'm really trying to get to, how much wall did you put in to your projections of 46.5 billion? What is the assumption there? Is that the entire border? Is it half the border?
So it will not include the entirety of the border. So we have a little less than 2,000 miles along the border. So we recognize that there are areas, geographic areas and terrain out there where a border wall does not make sense for us.
Do you
So
know
the-
how many of those miles you are assuming in that 46.5 billion number?
So in regards to primary border barrier, I can tell you that our operational need of what we've identified from a primary border barrier, we're about 700 miles of primary border
Okay, so
barrier.
that's the assumption in the 46.5 billion.
That's
You're
what
gonna
we
build
have in
some-
our planning so far, operational need.
And just quickly, what time frame does that assume? Because what you're doing is you're committing this appropriations committee to funding of that over time, which takes out of the other goals, which is why reconciliation and budgeting is a bad idea. What's the time frame? 10 years?
So what we have right now is just a planning stage of what our operational needs are based on whether or not funding is provided. When we get the funding, we will determine what the time frame is there. But we are working to shorten that time frame as much as possible.
Okay, thank you. I want to focus on what Ranking Member McCollum said in her opening statement. She said, quote unquote, that the fiscal year 2026 budget process is off to a very rough start, and it could get a lot rougher as we look out over the budget horizon. As she said, there are rumors that we won't get a full budget until June. There's also the concern that we would be required in this subcommittee and full committee to mark up before any effective oversight of the full budget. And there are even some concerns that some in the administration would prefer that the normal budget process not occur this year and move into another CR, which I think and hope we would all agree would be a disaster. And so from our perspective, we are, in the discharge of our oversight responsibilities, essentially having to shoot in the dark at oversight right now and do predictive oversight without knowing exactly what we're overseeing. And so that forces us into trying to get the information from you that you're in the middle of deliberating inside the Department of Defense right now, and to understand what the issues are that you are facing with HCR, because as we stand here today, since we are in a full year CR, we are in a situation where essentially the information and the decisions that we're being asked to make right now are 2 years old. That's the last time we did effective oversight on a decision that was actually reflected in a full budget. So I'm just going to go right down the line here and ask each of you, what are the principal issues that you are dealing with right now in the budget that we can start to get a handle on before we have a full budget, before we have full information, and especially if we do not have the opportunity to provide full oversight before we have to make major decisions in this subcommittee. General Nordhaus, what is the biggest issue you're facing today?
Congressman, first I'd like to thank Congress for adding some adds in the year-long CR with SPP and GRIA and our full-time manning to be able to use those in FY25. Certainly on the readiness accounts, the foundation, it's every part of readiness. So every dollar you put in that we can put a mechanic out on the flight line to be able to get helicopters or the machines that we operate to get after readiness is critical. Weapon system sustainment as well on parts, those dollars matter. So whatever we can do to increase that capability along those lines. And then on the modernization, as we talk about fighters and tankers and cyber, those are all critical as we go into the future along with what we're doing with the Army. And then lastly, for our warfighters, there are things that we can do in the future, whether it's duty status reform, full-time support, or MilTech modernization that can have a big impact as we go forward into the next year. Thanks,
Thank you.
Congressman.
Admiral Decor. Biggest budget issues you're facing right now?
Thank you. Sir, Congressman, I think the biggest issue for us related to people is the predictability and being able to get reservists on orders. It impacts not just morale, but it impacts readiness. When we're not able, they can't commit to their civilian employer, and they take time off from their civilian employer, and then we can't come through with the orders. So that is a big one as far as the people go. As far as equipment, we're very grateful for the ads we've gotten in 24 and 25 for the C-130, because as you heard, the C-130 is our #1 equipment priority. And we are behind Glide Slope for that recapitalization effort. So those are our
thank
biggest
you.
impacts.
I'm sorry I'm doing this fast, but I need to get through all of you. General Harder.
Yes, sir. Biggest issue really two, the reserve pay accounts. So that runs across our formation as far as getting our soldiers' orders cut, getting them to training exercises. We have some big training exercises coming up. We're looking at how do we manage that. And then it gets to Class 9 repair parts for our equipment, because that's all budgeted for, and how do we order that? So those are the two biggest issues, followed closely by military construction and sustainment of our facilities. That's where we're looking close.
General Hanson.
Yes, thank you, sir. I echo the thanks on including degree in this year's CR. That was certainly beneficial. But for us, we had to reduce our re-enlistment incentives for the remainder of this fiscal year as a #1 impact. And then I think second, as we lose our operational funds, not only for the reserve component, but on the active component in the Marine Corps, our exercises are minimized, which gives us less time to train with our active component forces like we're going to do when we're in the first island chain.
Thank you. And General Healy.
Sir, echoing much of what's been already said, the predictability and stability of being able to pay our participants is one of the biggest factors. With the O&M accounts, as I mentioned in my opening statement, we're going to be $26 million short of flying out our flying hours this year. So we're trying to figure that out. In addition, quarterly authority during a CR doesn't work well with weapon system sustainment when you've got large ticket items like $62 million to put a B-52 into periodic depot maintenance. So those continue to be challenges as we go forward.
Thank you very much.
Good, how are you doing, sir? Are you ROTC somewhere? Yes, sir. I go to the high school, sir. Which one? High school, sir. Barrington. Ah. How long have you been in ROTC there? Thank you. Thanks for everything. Thank you. Watch out. No, go ahead, please. Sorry, sir. Go ahead and take your picture. Could you take a picture of us? Yeah, of course. Yeah, it's way above your I know how to take a picture. Here I am asking her. Got it. Thanks, boss. Rodney. Aloha. Good to see you. Aloha. See you. Thank you. No get up. Thank you so much. Aloha. See you all. What is that? Teamsters. Right on. Thanks for coming. Thank you. Are you guys vets? Are you veterans? We're all three vets. All three veterans. My grandparents are buried here too. My grandfather is buried here too. Oh, yeah. He's up over on the slope right up there. Yeah. World War I veteran. Yeah. It's an honor. When we were invited last year, I guess it hit me hard. I didn't realize those things were on. You know, if you actually do a story about who's buried here in Hawaii, in this cemetery, there's a lot of connections that none of us realize, really. You know, two of the people, Mark Matsunaga, who I worked for, buried up over there. Mark Takai, my friend from the legislature, is buried over there. Hi, Susie. So there are a lot of people here, and family members too. It's truly an honor. I forgot my uncle is up over here. So, Navy veteran. Anyway, see you guys. It's good to see you. Aloha. Okay, I'll see you again. Hey, Walter. Good. How are you doing? Curio. Yes, sir. What brings you here? I'm on course. I think this is here. Huh? I'm on course here, sir. Ah, you're at the Security Institute. Yes, sir. Oh, I see. Yes, sir. Yeah, I'm Congress, U.S. Congress. Well, it's great to have you here. Is this anything like Nigeria here? No,
not really good because I brought me, and since we are here, I think to share with the memories.
So these are all your classmates
they're all
here? Oh, wow, right on. Thank you. Oh, everybody here. Oh, wow, okay. Hello, hi, I'm Ed. Ed Case from Congress. Welcome to Hawaii. Thank you. Hello, Ed Case. No, don't get up, that's all right. Welcome to Hawaii. Thank you. Bangladesh, wow, it's like, hi, Ed Case. Nice to meet you. Hi, good to see you. Aloha. Thank you. Thanks a lot. I better get up front. Thank you.
Paparo with the wreath presentation is Gold Award Ambassador Girl Scout Helena Connell.
Thank you, Ashley. Well, aloha and good morning. And thank you all for being here today. I want to begin with a special acknowledgement of those seated among us for whom every day is Memorial Day. America's Gold Star families remind us that the fallen heroes we are gathered to remember were sons and daughters, parents, siblings, husbands, and wives. In life, the brave men and women who died protecting our country and our freedom were someone's entire world. And today, as we honor their sacrifices, we also honor the Gold Star family members who mourned and who loved. It would mean a great deal if you would join me in recognizing the members of our Gold Star families who are here with us today. Thank you to Governor Josh Green, Lieutenant Governor Sylvia Luke, Senator Brian Schatz, Congressman Ed Case, Bishop Isao Ito, Chairman of the Universe Foundation, members of the Honolulu City Council, elected leaders, cabinet members, members of the Consular Corps, military service members, and friends. I am honored and grateful that so many of you have decided to join us this morning. And to Sergeant Major Alan Kellogg, recipient of our nation's highest military honor, it is a tremendous privilege to have you in our midst again, sir. Thank you for being here. The National Memorial Cemetery of the Pacific is a place where history lives in silence, and each grave marker tells a story. Here on Oahu, we are privileged to be surrounded by historic sites like this one, some of the most important in our nation's history. These are places that people from all across the globe travel to see out of respect and admiration. These sites serve as symbols of tragedy, like the USS Arizona, and symbols of triumph, like the battleship Missouri. And though they honor bravery, selflessness, and heroism, many of us pass by them every single day without truly seeing them. Our promise today is to ensure the significance of these historic places and the souls they commemorate are never forgotten. To ensure that future generations understand the cost of freedom and the weight of sacrifice. Our promise is to honor their service, not just in ceremonies like this one, but in the way we live our lives with unity and with purpose. And that mission is executed every day all around the globe by the members of our armed forces.
Mayor Blangiardi and Karen, thank you so much for hosting this solemn ceremony today. Good morning, Governor Green, Jamie, wonderful to see you, Lieutenant Governor Luke and Mike, deeply meaningful to see all of you today. And for my dear friends and mentors, Senator Schatz, Representative Case, great to see you. Great to see everyone here today. To the Consular Corps, veterans and veteran organizations, distinguished guests, families, flag and general officers, and the Joint Force, thanks for being here today to honor our nation's heroes, those who exemplified the greatest love by laying down their lives for their family and for the nation. On this solemn and yet hopeful day, standing on this hallowed ground reminds us that freedom is never free. We measure its cost in our greatest resource, the lives of America's sons and daughters, what we hold most dear. I'll join Mayor Blangiardi in honoring the Gold Star families who honor us today with your presence. And we stand here today with you in humble reverence. Your sacrifice reminds me why we gather, to honor those service members who gave everything, such as Army Corporal Toby Olson, Mililani High School, killed in Iraq, 2007, age 28. He rests here in Section 5, grave 437. His parents, Liz and Jim, are here today and carry his memory. Army Sergeant Eugene Williams, 25th ID at Schofield Barracks, killed in Iraq, 2003, age 24. His wife, Brandy, and daughters, Monica and Mia, are here with us today and carry his legacy. Army Chief Warrant Officer Edward Bali from Kapolei, killed in Afghanistan, 2014, age 42, rests here in Section 1, grave 1492. His wife, Christy, is here with us and honors his life. Marine Corporal Jonathan Faircloth, aerial observer with Marine Heavy Helicopter Squadron 363, gave his life in a helicopter crash at Kaneohe Bay, 2011, age 22. His mother-in-law, Corina, is here with us and keeps his memory alive. Air Force TAC-P Airman First Class Temujin Vong, Campbell High School, died in a training accident 2020, age 20. His mother, Selena, and siblings Katana and Konami are here with us and honor him. Air Force Sergeant Raymond Briggs, also deployed in the Persian Gulf as an Army soldier, died in 2010, age 36. His wife, Tia, and children, Milia and Kai, are here with us and carry his legacy forward. Navy Petty Officer, First Class, Mario Espina, a proud son of Kailua, a graduate of Kalaheho High School and lifelong parishioner at St. Anthony's, served with VR 51 Windjammers at K-Bay and died in 2020, age 32. His parents, Liz and Tom, are here with us today. Army Green Beret, Sergeant First Class Nicholas LaPlante, died 2020, age 38. He rests here, Section 22, grave 834. His wife, Deandra, is here and carries his memory. Army Sergeant First Class Robert Allen, died in Honolulu, 2018, age 36. His wife, Jamie, is here with us and honors him. Navy Chief Petty Officer Eduardo Lamongo, Jr., deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan, died 2022, age 36. His parents, Farley and Eduardo, and his brother Ed are here with us today and carry his legacies. I'm sure there may be others, and for all of you, we honor you all their sacrifices, etched in our hearts and in these hallowed grounds, represent a profound and personal loss for those who are gathered here today. Let's consider what they gave up. For the father who never attended their child's graduation, or got that phone call asking for fatherly advice. The son or daughter who didn't come home to parents who still listen for their footsteps at the door. And for the spouse whose side of the dinner table is empty. They sacrifice birthdays and anniversaries, barbecues, plate lunches, and simple Sunday dinner. They gave up catching a glimpse of these magnificent rainbows over these majestic islands, and they forfeited the chance to grow old with those they loved. This is why we gather here today, not to honor abstract concepts of duty and service, but to acknowledge the people who paid for our freedom with their lives.
Good evening, and since I'm from Hawaii, aloha. Like young Kim, I just so deeply appreciate this
incredible award. And in all honesty, I'm a little embarrassed to accept it because I just think that there are so many deserving people in Congress that could just as easily have gotten this. And because I look around the room and I think about your past awardees, and so many of them were my mentors, people that I looked up to and still look up to for the principles of the former members of Congress. And I'm really, really honored to share this with my colleagues, Senators Booker, Young, thank you so much. And of course, Representative Kim, as you leave for that other side of the aisle, for your partnership. She always gets embarrassed when I say this, but she said it herself. She's actually a product of Hawaii, spent her teenage years, graduated from high school in Hawaii. I think she doesn't like me to say that because somehow it's going to take away from California, but that's cool. And so you have really two products of Hawaii here tonight, and so I think maybe there's something in the water out there that lends itself to some of what we're all doing here. And really, a really special mahalo to the former members of Congress for all that you do to keep the flame of representative democracy alive, in this country and throughout this world. Incredible work. And as has already been pointed out, I have a somewhat checkered relationship with the former members of Congress. I actually had to write it down because it got so confusing. When I was a member the first time, 2002 to 2007, I didn't want to be a former member of Congress. Later on, I became a former member of Congress, but I didn't want to be a former member of Congress then. After I got over all of that and settled back into my other life, I welcomed the opportunity to be a former member of Congress, participated in the programs, and really enjoyed myself until a former member of Congress, a member of this association, talked me into running for office again. Now I'm back in office, and I'm not ready to be a former member of Congress again. So if you can sort all of that out, let me know at some point. Some say that statesmanship is a lost art. Some say that statesmanship is outdated, that it doesn't matter anymore, that in this day of incredible polarization and division and really government by combat, there's no place for statesmanship, and we reject that. We reject that. We have to reject that, and we do reject that. And we do that because we know that the only real way forward for this country, the only real way forward for this country is the art of governing for pragmatic and practical solutions, to seek consensus where we can, and where we can't, to allow the institutions of representative democracy to guide us in our divisions, our discussions, and our disagreements, and our decisions. That's what representative democracy is. And representative democracy is hard work. Polarization and division is much easier, to be honest. All you have to do is be against everything. Representative democracy is something different. We carry that flame here, and that flame has to be carried consciously every single day, and it has to be projected out around our country and around our world. And I am very, very honored to receive this award for many who believe in what I just said. And I'm very, very honored to do the good work with all of you going forward. Mahalo.